9. The agonizing pain coursing through Norik Vizaren proved to be the first sign that he had not, after all, perished, that he could breathe. Also indicated immediately to him that he had not dropped into the sea, and that, therefore, he had struck the deck. Why he had not snapped his neck nor broken several other bones, Norik could only suspect it to be the fault of Bartek's cursed armor. It had already saved him from the demonic behemoth. A simple, short fall likely had been child's play to it. Yet, in his heart, the veteran soldier half wished that it failed. At least then he would be rid of his nightmares. The horrors. Norik opened his eyes to see that he lay in his cabin. Outside, the storm raged unceasingly. Only two forces could have dragged him back in here. One being the suit, yet after what it had done to the tentacle monstrosity, had seemed weaker, unable to perform any feat. Norik himself felt so drained. He marveled that he could even move. The weakness felt so odd that the weary soldier wondered if either the armor or the beast had somehow sucked part of his life from him. At that moment, the door swung open. Captain Costco hobbling into the tiny cabin with a covered bowl in his hand. A scent that Norik found both enticing and repulsive drifted from the bowl. "Awake? Good! No waste of food!" Without waiting for the soldier to rise, the cadaverous mariner handed him the bowl. Norik managed to right himself enough to eat. "Thank you." In return, the captain merely grunted. How long have we been out?" Costco considered the question for a time, possibly wanting to make certain that he understood it. "Day! Little more!" "How's the ship? Did the creature damage it much?" Again, a pause. "Ship always damaged, but can still sail. Yes." "How can we possibly sail in a storm with no crew at all?" The captain scowled. Norik suspected that he finally asked a question for which Costco had no good answer. Of course, they could not sail without a crew. Likely the Hawksfire went around and around, tossed in random directions by the winds and waves. They might have survived the attack by the monster, but that did not mean that they would reach Lane. The monster. Norik's memory of what happened seemed so outrageous that he finally had to ask Costco if what he had seen had been truth. The captain shrugged. "Seen you fall! Saw Sea Witch fall!" The foreign mariner had evidently decided that what he had confronted had been the legendary behemoth mentioned by so many sailors. Norik believed different, certain after his encounters with the imps that the winged creatures at the inn, and this had been yet another demonic force, but not one this time, summoned by the enchanted armor. Legend spoke of Bartek's rise to dark glory, first as a pawn of hellish powers, then as the sorcerer both respected and feared by them, and how he had led a legion of demons in his quest to overwhelm all else. No one, though, ever spoke of how the greater demons might have felt about the usurping of their power. Had they noted the armor's escape from the tomb and so feared that the ghost of Bartek sought to re-establish his hold over their kind? His head pounded at such outlandish thoughts. Best he concerned himself with his own situation. If the Hawksfire remained unmanned, it would continue to meander over the Twin Seas, either sailing on long past the deaths of the only two aboard, would finally be sinking due to some aspect of the endless storm. "I'm no seaman," he commented to Costco between bites of food, "but show me what I can do and I'll help. We've got to get this ship back on course." Now Costco snorted. "Done enough! What more? What more?" His attitude not only struck Norik as peculiar, but it also stirred the fire's own ire. He knew that much of this situation could be blamed on him, or rather the armor, but his offer to help the captain had been an honest one. Norik doubted that the suit would prevent him from helping. After all, it had been the one that truly wanted to reach Lane, not him. "Listen, we'll die if we don't get the Hawksfire under control. If the storm doesn't take us, then we'll either eventually starve when the supplies go bad, or more likely just strike some rocks and sink like a stone. Is that what you want for your ship?" The gaunt figure shook his head. Fool! Fall! Crack skull! He had the audacity to seize Nork by the arm. Come! Come! Putting aside the nearly empty bowl, he followed Costco out into the storm. His legs took a few steps to getting used to the rocking of the ship, but the captain waited for him to catch up. Costco seemed caught between hatred, respect, and fear when it came to his passenger. He did not offer any assistance, but neither did he try to force Nork along any faster than the weakened man could go. Reaching the open deck, the mariner let Nork move past him. The veteran fighter held tight to what handrail remained. Peering through the heavy rain, he tried to see what Costco was sought to show him. All Nork could make out was the same empty scene he had confronted earlier. No sailors manned the ropes, no helmsman stood at the wheel. And yet, the wheel turned. Ropes no longer held it in place. Nork squinted, certain that the wheel should have been spinning wildly, yet it barely moved, sometimes turning one direction, then adjusting to other, as if some invisible sailor kept it under control. A movement to the side caught his attention. Focusing, Nork at first had the horrible fear that one of the main lines had suddenly untied, only to have it re-loop itself before his very eyes, then tighten the new knot. All around him, he began to notice subtle shifts, subtle changes. Ropes adjusted according to the needs of the sails. The sails themselves adjusted as necessary. The wheel continued to counter the churning waves, fixing the Hawk's fire on a particular route, one that Nork expected would turn out to be almost directly west. No crew manned the vessel, but it seemed the Hawk's fire not to matter in the least. "What's going on?" he shouted at the captain. Costco only gave him a knowingly glance. The armor! Again, its power astounded him. It had dealt with the gargantuan demon, and now it ensured that its own journey would continue regardless of the mutiny of the crew. The Hawksfire would reach port one way or another. Nork stumbled away, heading for his cabin, but not down into the mess. Costco trailed behind him, a captain with no purpose on this voyage. Both men shook off the rain. Costco dug into a chest, pulled out a dusty bottle whose contents he did not offer to his companion. Nork thought of asking for a drink. He certainly needed one, but thought better of it. His head pounded enough at the moment, but he preferred to try to let it clear. "How long until we reach port?" he finally asked. Costco put down the bottle long enough to answer him. 3, 4 days, maybe." Nork grimaced. He had hoped for less than that. 3 or 4 more days aboard a vessel where wheels and ropes moved by themselves, and his own companion remained a wild-looking captain who thought him a devil in human form? He rose. "I'll be in my cabin until it's time to eat." Costco made no move to stop him, the lanky mariner quite content to be alone with his bottle. Stepping out into the storm, Nork battled his way back into the tiny cabin. He would have preferred to stay in the much more spacious, not to mention drier, area below deck, but in Costco's presence, the guilt over the troubles Nork's being here had caused the man ate at the soldier. It amazed him that Costco had not just slit his throat when he'd come across the unconscious figure. Of course, after seeing what Nork had supposedly done, then discovering that even the fall had not killed his unsettling passenger, the captain likely suspected that any attempt to slay the stranger would end up in Costco, the dead party. He would have probably not been far from wrong. The rain continued to not only soak Nork, but tried to beat him to the deck. In all his years of fighting for one master or another, the veteran had faced harsh weather of all sorts, including blizzards. However, to him, this storm had no equal, and he could only pray that it would last when in the end the Hawksfire reached Luke Ghislaine's port. That assumed, of course, that the ship would reach the port. The intense rain kept visibility limited, not that there had ever been much to see either aboard the ship or among the waves beyond. Nevertheless, Nork had to continually blink away moisture just to see a few yards ahead of him. Never had the cabin seemed so far away as it did this moment. The heaviness of the armor did not help. Either the metal plate seeming twice its normal weight, still at least Nork did not have to worry about rust settling in. The enchantments cast by Bartok had clearly kept the suit as new as the day the demon master had first donned it. Not for the first time Nork stumbled, cursing the weather. He strained, then wiped his eyes clear again so that he could see just how far away the door to his quarters remained. A murky figure stared back at him from the aft section of the walkway. "Costco?" he called out, realizing only afterward that the captain had not possibly rushed all the way from the stern. Not with his bad leg. More to the point, this figure stood taller and more than the mariner, and wore a broad-shouldered cloak reminiscent of a Vajari sorcerer. Reminiscent of Fotson's cloak. He took a step forward, trying to see better. The figure seemed half-missed, and Knaak wondered if what stood before him could only be the result of his own tortured, weary mind. "Fotson? Fotson?" The shadow did not answer. Knaak pushed away another step forward, and the hair on the back of his neck suddenly stiffened. He whirled around. A second, somewhat shorter figure near the bow drifted in and out of sight, his wiry form hinting of an acrobat, or more likely a thief. What likely had to be the travel cloak fluttered in the wind, enshrouding and obscuring most of the second figure's detail. But Knaak imagined a dead, still grinning face, the head cocked slightly to the side because the neck had been broken. "Satan," he blurted, his hands suddenly tinged. Knaak glanced down, barely catching a sight of the red aura about them. A bolt of lightning struck so near that it lit up the entire ship. So near, in fact, that the stunned fighter almost swore that it touched the Hawk's fire, yet did not damage it in any way. For a moment, the blinding brilliance surrounded Knaak, making him even briefly forget the two specters. His eyesight finally returned to normal. Blinking, Knaak glanced toward both the bow and the stern, and saw no sign whatsoever of either of the dire shades. "Satan! Trist!" the frantic fighter shouted. Turning back to the stern, he yelled, "Fotson!" Only the storm answered him, rumbling with renewed fury. Unwilling to give up yet, Knaak headed back toward the bow, shouting Satan's name over and over again. He made his way across the top deck, scanning every direction. Why he desired to confront either of the two dead comrades, even Knaak Vizran could not actually say. How could he do that, when even knowing that the armor had claimed their lives? The former mercenary still blamed himself for not having heeded Fotson's a few precious seconds earlier. Had he done so, he would not be where he was now. Had he done so, neither of his friends would be dead. "Trist, damn you! If you're real, if you're there, come to me! I'm sorry! I'm sorry!" A hand fell upon his shoulder. "Who you call?" demanded Costco. "What you call now?" Even in the darkness and in the rain, Knaak could see that the fear rising in Captain's watery eyes. To Costco, either his passenger had gone completely mad, or, more likely, Knaak planned to summon yet new demons. Neither choice obviously thrilled the mariner. "No one. Nothing. No more demons?" "No more. None." He pushed back Captain Costco, wanting nothing more than to rest, but no longer interested in his cabin. Looking back at the perplexed and frustrated sailor, Knaak asked, "Are there bunks for the crew below?" Costco nodded glumly. Likely he slept in a cabin near those bunks and did not like the direction of the question. Bad enough he had to share the ship with a summoner of these hellish creatures, but now the same demon master planned to sleep nearby? No doubt Costco expected various monsters to go wandering around below deck if that happened. "I'll sleep in one of them." Not caring how the captain surely felt, Knaak headed below deck. Perhaps the battle against the demonic behemoth had taken too much out of him. Resurrecting his guilt over the deaths of his comrades, perhaps he had imagined both of them. That seemed so very likely, just as it seemed likely that he had imagined Fotson on the deck in Gay Pool. The mutilated bodies of his two friends still lay in the tomb, there to be found by the next eager treasure hunters. Yet, as he shook off the rain and headed in search of the bunks, a stray thought disturbed him. Nork stared at his gloved hands, flexed the fingers that, for the moment, obeyed his will. If he had imagined it all, if the shades of Fotzen and Satan Triss had not confronted him out on deck, why had the gauntlets glowed? Even if only for a moment. In the dead of the night, the army of General Augustus Malevolent went on the move, entering the vast, terrible desert of Knaak. Many of the men did not look forward to this march, but they had been given an order and knew no other course of action but to obey. That some of them would surely perish before they reached their destination, assumed to be the lush prize of Luke Olaine, did not deter them in the least. Each hoped that they would be one of the fortunate survivors, one of those who would lay claim to some portion of the wealth of the Port Kingdom. At the head of the army rode the general himself, the helmet of Bartok worn proudly. A faint sphere of light conjured by Galena floated just ahead of him, marking the path for his steed. That it might also identify him as the most desired target by ambushers did not bother Malevolent in the least. Clad in the ancient helmet and his own spell-enshrouded armor, the general sought to show the ranks that he feared nothing, and nothing could defeat him. Galena traveled beside her lover, outwardly indifferent to everything, but all the while quietly utilizing her sorcery in order to detect any possible threat to the column. Behind the witch came a covered wagon loaded with Malevolent's folded tent, the various personal items from within it, and seeming almost as an afterthought, Galena's wooden chest. At last, the armor will be within my grasp, the general murmured, staring ahead into the darkness. I can already sense its nearness. With it, I shall be complete. With it, I shall command a host of demons. Galena considered, then dared ask, "Can you be so certain that it'll do all this for you, my general? True, the helmet has enchantments, and the armor is said to be even more bespelled, but so far the helmet has left us all baffled. What if the armor acts much the same? I pray not, but the secrets of Bartok may demand more of us than we're able to—" "No!" he snapped at her with such vehemence that his guards, situated just behind him, immediately drew their swords, perhaps thinking that the sorceress had sought to betray their leader. Augustus Malevolent signaled them to resheathe their weapons, then glared at Galena. "It will not be so, my dear. I have seen glorious visions brought forth by the helmet, the shade of Bartok surely calling me to add to his victories. I have seen in each of those visions the power of the helmet and the armor combined. The spirit of the bloody warlord lives on in the suit, and it is his desire that become his mortal bearer of his standard." He waved a hand at the desert. "Why else does the fool who wears it now comes to me? He does so because it is destined. I will be Bartok's successor, I tell you." The witch cringed, taken aback by his outbursts. "As you say, my general." Malevolent abruptly calmed, once more a self-satisfied smile across his face. "As I say, and after that, yes, Luke Olaine will be mine to take. This time, I shall not fail." Galena had ridden with the commander from Westmarch for some time, likely knew him better than any under his command. Yet in all that time, the only mention of Luke Olaine had been as an eventual target, one that Malevolent had dreamed of conquering. She had never heard him speak of it as a past defeat. "You've been there before?" With something akin to devotion, he gently adjusted the helmet, turning away from her and preventing the sphere from illuminating of his expressions the armor yet did not already hide. "Yes, and if not for my brother, it would have been mine for the taking. But this time, Vizjun will fall." "Vizjun?" she blurted, her tone incredulous. Fortunately, General Malevolent paid her no mind. attention concentrated on the darkened, shifting sands. Galena did not repeat the name again, preferring to immediately drop, if not forget, the subject. Perhaps it had been a slip of the tongue, just as something else he had said had been much of an innocent mistake. After all, the general had much on his mind. So very much. She knew that he had never been to the fabled Kegistani Temple City, had never yet been across the sea to the land. In addition, Augustus Malevolent had been only a child, and an unwanted bastard at that. Yet someone else Galena knew of had only been to fabled Vizjun, but had sought to conquer it, to destroy it, only to be thwarted in the end by his own brother, Bartok. With a surreptitious glance, the witch studied the helmet, trying to divine its intentions. The visions that the Western commander had experienced had clearly been for his own benefit alone. Even when she had secretly tried the artifact on, no such images had been shown her. Yet it appeared that the more Augustus wore it, the more he had troubles differentiating between his own life and that of the monstrous warlord. Did the helmet perform some sort of enchantment each time these incidents happened? Galena casually touched a black jeweled ring on one of the fingers of her left hand, turning the gem in the direction of her lover's head. She mouthed two forbidden words, afterward cautiously glancing to see if the general had noticed her lips moving. He had not, nor did he now notice the invisible tendrils extending from that ring, tendrils that reached out to touch the helmet in various places. Only Galena knew that they were there, seeking, probing, trying to detect whatever forces permeated the ancient armor. Perhaps if she finally discovered how they affected the general, the witch could take the first step toward using the powerful enchantments for her own goals. Even some slight of bit new knowledge would go far toward extending her own abilities. A flash of crimson light flared from the helmet, illuminating for a stunned Galena each of the magical tendrils rising from her ring. A surge of power coursed through her with lightning speed, eating away at the tendrils and converging on her finger. Freeing for herself, the sorceress reached to pull the ring free. Only mortal, she moved too slow. The streams of crimson light devoured the last of the tendrils, then came together at the black jewel itself. The gemstone sizzled, turning molten in less than a blink of an eye. The liquefied stone dripped over her finger, burning her skin, searing her flesh. Galena managed to bite back a scream, transforming her reaction to the intense pain into a barely audible gasp. "Did you say something, my dear?" General Malevolent casually asked, his eyes never leaving the landscape. She managed to keep her voice calm and assured despite her suffering. "No, Augustus. Just a slight cough. A bit of desert sand in my throat." "Yes, that's a risk here. Perhaps you should cover it with a veil." He said no more, either focused on his duties as commander or lost once more in Bartok's past. Galena carefully looked around. No one had noticed the astounding display of powerful energies in conflict. Only she, with her magical senses, had been witness to both her failure and her punishment. Giving silent thanks for that bit of fortune at least, she cautiously investigated the damage. The ring had turned to slag, the rare and resonant gem, a black, burning stain on her finger. The band she finally managed to remove, but the melted jewel left a permanent and painful ebony blot on her otherwise unmarred hand. The injury meant little to her overall. She had endured much worse for her craft. No, what bothered Galena more concerned the helmet's violent reaction to her probing. None of her spells in the past had caused it to respond in such vehemence. It also seemed as if something within the armor had awakened, something with distinct intentions of its own. It had always been her assumption that the ancient warlord had cast numerous enchantments of tremendous power on his armor, the better to aid him in battle. Such precautions would have made perfect sense, yet if she had only guessed a part of it, what if even those who had slain Bartok had not realized the full extent of the mastery of magic's demonic? Did enchantments alone possess the helmet and plate, or did Galena discover more? Did Bartok himself seek to return from the dead?